Yeah, I know, exactly.
We have a person in our staff development group that does that on staff development day.
I should have a bell. I'm gonna bring
delays in getting here, or what?
I was being grilled by the rules committee right before I got here.
Oh, really? Wait,
I mean, by the staff. It was by the staff.
in the window of this room that Jeff.
I'm going to call the meeting back to order. There's one item I neglected to mention during a previous item that we discussed, is that during a discussion of the future of meeting locations, I did want to report to the board I had received a call from the president of Santa Monica College, and I promised him I would mention that to the board, that he is also eager for the board to at one point consider Santa Monica as a venue for a meeting, and he referred that to the chancellor's office. But I'm delighted that many districts are interested in hosting the Board of Governors, and I want to just thank where we were a little bit late because there was actually probably 15 journalists in the other room wanted to talk about the vote that was just taken, and so we made ourselves available for that. Before we go to the next item, I want to recognize Member Epstein, who wanted to make a brief statement.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to explain why I abstained. It had nothing to do with my support for the baccalaureate program. I do support it. I had no concerns necessarily about any of the colleges that were picked. It was just the fact that we weren't given enough information to really make a decision of that magnitude, and that's why I abstained.
So noted. Thank you.
And please, I have the same statement as well. Totally support the program, what we're trying to do here. I just wanted a little more information on relevance to market and data points and things like that. And so I did pull aside the chancellor and talk to him a little bit and explain a little more about it and feel comfortable.
And
So,
speaking as board chair, I was grateful to the chancellor for helping me frame the wording of the motion in a way that will allow us to then cast a vote in the March meeting, and I'm confident we will all have sufficient information to act in make a final action on that issue. So now we have to figure out how we're going to pay for it. So we're going to item 3.1, Chancellor Harris.
Thank you, President Baum, members of the board, and again, let me acknowledge that we heard your concerns loud and clear, and we absolutely, between now and March, will come back with more detailed information, especially on those labor market demands and the basis on which these pilots were recommended. With that, as you know, the legislation not only required the board to make the selection of the 15 pilots, but it also required you to consider the funding structure of these programs. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Vice Chancellor Troy, who will make a recommendation in that regard. Dan?
Yes, thank you, Chancellor Harris, President Baum, members of the board. I do believe since this is a first reading, we do need to have that reading of the legalistic notice.
Yes, in fact, I have that reading here. Let me find.
It's right here.
Okay. Okay. So, we are going to announce and discuss the item as we normally would up until the time we would take public comment. So please go, and then I will then convene a public hearing on that.
Okay. Thank you, President Baum. The statute, SB 850, which authorized the baccalaureate pilot, also required the Board of Governors by March of this year to adopt a funding formula for that pilot. It should be noted, however, that the statute in question went ahead and specified the key provisions of the funding formula. So the proposed regulatory change I bring to you today, a regulatory addition, would essentially put those key provisions into our regs to make sure that they're recognized in our regulations. The key provisions of the funding pilot provides that for students participating in a pilot who are taking upper division coursework, will be assessed a fee above and beyond the normal resident fee of $84 per unit for those courses. Otherwise, the funding process is very similar to our lower division coursework. This colleges would claim FTS through our apportionment system, receive the same apportionment funding as they would normally receive, charge the $46 per fee unit for that they would normally charge. It's just that this additional $84 per unit for these courses would provide colleges with additional resources to meet to fund the provisions of the pilot. So we do provide that regulatory change here with a couple of technical additions that are similar to our other fee structures. So the $84 is a semester calculation. For quarter semesters, we have to do a slightly different calculation. We provide that here in the reg. It's essentially 2/3 of what it would be for the semester, and also provide the fractional quarter or fraction time calculation as well. One clear clarification we do wish to make in the reg is that we make it very clear that the fees generated from this from the pilot are not offsets to the general fund. These are local revenues that the colleges can take in that will help them fund the pilot. Otherwise, if they were offsetting to the state general fund, then the colleges would not receive any benefit from those additional fees. It would just be an additional charge to the students. So with that, I await any comments from you or from the public, and hopefully we'll be able to approve the regs in March.
You already did these, right?
Okay, so, and we have no items from the public, so we turn over to the board. Member Estolano.
Great. Thank you, Vice Chancellor Troy. 2 questions. First, how did you arrive at $84 a unit? How was that calculated, and who calculated it?
It was specified in the statute.
Okay, just want to get that on the record.
That's right. I think if I can add on to that a little bit. As part of the pilot review, the Ledge Analyst's Office is required to do both an interim and a final evaluation, and assessing the cost of the program as part of their review.
Great. So this is really a formality to put it into our own regulations and basically align those and make them consistent.
Correct.
And then second, if you know offhand, if somebody's doing a full-time course load, how would that compare at that $84 a unit to like a Cal State full-time course load? Would the tuition, the fees be comparable?
Yeah, I'm not as up to date on the Cal State fees. I'm sure this is considerably less than what a Cal State student would be assessed. Note that the normal $46 per unit fee that they're charged, if they meet the provisions for waiver, they can still have that waived. For the $84 unit, there is no provision in statute for that to be waived by the BOG, so they would have to go through other financial aid programs, whether federal or Cal grants, et cetera, if they are in need of relief for that.
Great, but even at $84 a unit for these additional upper division courses, it's still
I
likely
think
a
that would be
substantial
considerably
savings.
less than a CSU or UC.
Thank you.
Yes.
Member Belinsky.
You know, I should have asked this with the last presentation, but because it's coming up in terms of funding and the funding for a class, that these upper division classes will be funded at the same rate by the state or as the lower division. I think that's what I heard you say so far. Will there be a process, because that wasn't clear to me then, of the degree coming forward, the courses associated with the degree coming forward, and colleges being told, so to speak, the only upper division courses that you can offer have to be related to the degree. You can't just go now start adding all kind of other upper division courses as a way to make money. That will be the understanding.
Yes.
Okay.
In fact, the only upper division courses that would be added, now there will be some upper division general ed, but they need to be tailored to meet the needs of a given program. What will be hard to determine is whether occasionally you get a student in one of those courses who's not actually enrolled in that major. Those are details to be worked out over time.
Yeah, and I would suspect that there will be subsequent regulations before this board in the coming months to clarify some of those issues.
That'd be good.
what kind of state apportionment would accompany growth for a baccalaureate degree program? So they add it, students enroll. How does that? Will there be any adjustment that way?
No, it would just be like claiming any other FTS in the system. We get about $4,700 per FTS. So the intent of the legislation is to provide a similar apportionment for the students involved in these pilot programs, with the exception that the college could charge another $84 per unit on top of it.
Now, what would be important to note is that, especially in the case of some of the rural colleges, that in many cases that's going to be their opportunity for enrollment growth. So when you look at some of the urban colleges and suburban colleges, they have sort of built in and pent up demand, and their need for growth is certainly not as great. But in the case of some of these rural institutions that suffer from lack of demand, if there is demand for a bachelor's program, that will certainly be helpful to them.
Yeah, as Chancellor Harris says, they may attract new students to the campus, or may keep some of these existing students there longer, a couple more years, as they fulfill the pilot.
I know it's not it's not part of this conversation, but our task force on workforce development, and part of it is going to be how we fund future workforce development initiatives. How will the baccalaureate degree program integrate with that kind of deliberation?
Well, it's difficult to say at this point, but you've hit an important note, and that is that the task force will be taking a look at the funding of career tech education, generally speaking, and at some point the conversation about how the bachelor's degree is impacted by that, because these are, generally speaking, career tech fields only, will be part of that conversation.
I was just curious about the compensation for a faculty member teaching a baccalaureate program versus a community college program. Is that going to be left to the individual institution to determine?
It is. All of our faculty contracts are collectively bargained locally up and down the state, and there clearly are collective bargaining implications for these programs. And one of the things that the Academic Senate and the statewide collective bargaining groups have reminded us of in consultation is that there are a myriad of decisions that have to be made by individual colleges as these programs are offered, and that's an example of one that will have to be negotiated locally.
Any further discussion? This is a first ring. Member Avalos?
Yeah. So will candidates be eligible for fee waivers as well as part of the same program?
Not for the $84. They are still eligible for the $46 component, the normal resident fee, but for the extra fee associated with the pilot, there is no Board of Governors fee waiver. They'd have to go through federal aid or Cal grants, et cetera.
At this point.
Correct.
Okay. Member Van Loon.
Yeah, to address Member Estolano's question, Member Avalos and I just did a little bit of research, impromptu research. We calculated that the CSU per unit is approximately $220. The UC is approximately $270. Your calculations were about 40% less for the CSU and 60% less for the CSU and 40% less for the UC. Oh, never mind, just 60% less for the CSU.
Yeah, the
Thank you.
total fee under this provision would be $132, so we'd be well below the CSU levels.
Okay, so we're going to go to the public hearing. We have just concluded the first reading of the proposed addition of Section 58520 to Title V of the California Code of Regulations regarding baccalaureate degree pilot program fees. We will now begin the public hearing for the receipt of comments concerning the proposed action. Prior to the adoption of Section 58520, we will consider and respond to these comments, as well as those written comments received during the comment period, which ends on February 24th, 2015. Any members of the public that wish to address us now?
We have no speaker cards.
Okay. This concludes the public hearing. We will be open to take written comments through February 24th.
Thank you.
I have a general question, if I could, that goes back to our other issue before. I was just curious, when we offer the Associate of Arts degree for transfer, we do the AA-T, I believe. How are these diplomas going to be awarded when they do complete their course programs? Well, is that up again to the institutions, or will that be a more of a general umbrella type?
Well, if I can answer both, because I do think one of the things we'll do during this pilot period, and now that you've identified initially what those colleges are, we're going to bring them together and begin those conversations. But once you have finally identified the colleges, they really will work together as a cohort of institutions. Now, there are a myriad of nomenclature for the bachelor's degree. It can be a Bachelor of Science, it can be a Bachelor of Arts. I doubt that there will be many Bachelor of Arts in these kinds of programs, but it's not inconceivable. And then there are other designations that could be used. And I think the Senate's going to weigh in heavily on that. We've already started some conversations with the leadership of the Senate about the nomenclature on the degrees. At some point, however, it will be influenced heavily by the local college, and because they are the degree granting authority. We hope, however, to have conversations so that, because this is a pilot, as we're developing the nomenclature to be used, we'd like to do that with the future in mind and try to structure it so that it makes sense for the state on down the road. That's a great question, by the way. There are so many questions that need to be worked through in this pilot process. That's one of the elegance of a program like this, is that we really do have a chance to take 15 colleges and work with them over the next several years to make this happen.
We're moving on to item 4.1 in the agenda, an update on the Step Forward Priorities Project and the Student Awareness Campaign and system-wide integrated website. And we want to thank Keitha and her colleagues for their patience, because this was really originally on our agenda for the meeting in November, and due to the timing, we had to push it to this meeting.
Thank you, President Baum, members of the board. It is a pleasure to again introduce Executive Director of the Foundation, Keitha Mills, to give you what I think is a really exciting report. Keitha?
Thank you, Chancellor Harris, President Baum, members of the board. Very happy to talk to you guys today about the Step Forward Student Awareness Campaign around priority enrollment. The written report is in your book on page 65, but I'll actually be speaking to the PowerPoint that I think you have in front of you, and it's a little bit small, so I'm hoping we can actually get it on the screen as well. So the Step Forward Priorities Project campaign was a very collaborative project between the Foundation and the Chancellor's Office. And maybe while we're getting the technology up, by way of background, you may recall a few meetings ago I spoke about the various ways that the Foundation works to support initiatives of the Chancellor's Office and Board of Governors. And the Student Success Initiative has been kind of our flagship fundraising effort over the past several years. And as part of that, we've raised over $5 million to support not only the work of the task force itself, but subsequent activities related to the recommendations and implementation of the recommendations to help support the work of the Chancellor's Office. And so this is one of the larger projects that we were able to attract philanthropic funding to, again, help accelerate the work that was already happening around student success. So the campaign is basically a student outreach campaign and system integrated website that is designed to encourage students to both get on track and stay on track to complete their educational goals. As I mentioned, it was widely collaborative. It was a great team effort between our foundation staff and Chancellor's Office leadership to bring this together. And we are very appreciative of the generous support from the Kresge Foundation that made this possible. Kresge invested just under $1 million to help us build this campaign. So as I mentioned, we had several members of the foundation team who worked on this project. I want to say a special thank you to Vice Chancellor Paul Feast for his leadership on this effort. We also had active engagement with the Student Services leadership and technology leadership here at the Chancellor's Office as well. Butte College was a significant partner on this project as it relates to the integration with CCC Apply, which is the website where students go to apply for their community college. And I also want to acknowledge two really important consultants that worked on this project. Amy Supinger, who many of you may recognize, she was the former executive director of the Student Success Task Force, so very engaged in this work. And then Lucha Ortega, who's a former vice president of student services at Shasta College. So we really had a powerhouse team that came together and helped make this possible. So our objectives of this campaign were really threefold. I think first and foremost was really to further the momentum of the Student Success Initiative. Secondly, we wanted to increase the number of students who declare a program of study and complete the requirements for priority registration. So you may recall there were new rules that were recently implemented by the Board of Governors that require all students to go through an orientation and an assessment and an education plan in order to maintain their priority enrollment. This was a change, so it was really important that we help get the word out so students know how to get the classes that they need. And we coupled that with a technology application that was system-wide that provides information and resources that will help guide students through this process. We launched over the summer and on August 21st to be exact, so just before the fall semester when the students were coming in to enroll. And we were really proud to have almost 6,000 users hit the site in the first week. And the reason that we feel that this number was really impressive is that this was achieved with zero paid advertising. So users were attracted to this site by pure grassroots marketing. So they were either driven through CCC Apply, so students that were going into CCC Apply to apply for a college and being directed to the site, and or they were driven there by their local colleges. We continue to see active engagement with the site with averaging about 1,000 students a day. And of course, that peaks when we get close to registration period. So it's being very widely used, and we're really excited about the traffic that it's receiving. This is just a couple of examples of some of that grassroots marketing that I talked about through social media. So these are some Twitter posts by a couple of colleges. You know, learn how to transfer and graduate on time. There's an invaluable resource site for students attending California community colleges. Tired of being waitlisted for colleges. So go to stepforward.cccco.edu, and this will help you get the classes that you need when you need them. So in addition to launching the website, we sent out paper collateral materials for the colleges as well. So every single college during the month of August received a ginormous box of collateral material to go with this campaign. Brochures, bookmarks, stickers, notepads, posters. You have a few things that are there at your desk as examples. So we armed all 112 colleges with these materials so that they could place them around their campus where students could pick them up. The counselors could have these materials where, as the counselor is talking to the student could leave with something that had the website on it and had a little bit of information on it, and really helping the local colleges get the word out so that their students know what the new rules are and then know what they mean and how to follow them. We're really proud of this work and the acknowledgement that it's received. The team has been awarded 4 district-level medallion awards from the National Council for Marketing and Public Relations for this work. 3 golds for recruitment and marketing program, microsite and posters, and a silver for the videos. And then we just recently were notified that both the microsite and the videos are earning national awards that will be recognized at the conference in March. So really, again, a powerhouse team, award-winning materials, and a really useful program for our students in our colleges. So what is it? So as I talked about earlier, it is an awareness campaign coupled with an integrated website. So I talked about the boxes that were received by each of the colleges. And so in August, all 112 colleges received a box. They were also given instructions about how to reorder. So throughout the semester, as they're needing more materials or more of this or less of that, they're contacting us and we're sending them materials. Then we sent out another large shipment at the beginning of the spring semester. So we're continuing to get these the items out to the colleges. A number of reorders, which tells us that a number of colleges are finding this really, really helpful. We also heard from some of our colleges that they're expanding some of this work into their high school outreach. So they're taking these materials into the high school. So as the high school students are starting to think about, gosh, I think I want to roll to community college, what do I need to do? This is what you need to do to get the classes that you need and get priority registration. So those print collateral materials were accompanied a website. So all the print materials you'll see provide general information, but then direct the students to the website. The students can access the website primarily through CCC Apply. So when students go into CCC Apply and to enroll in their community college, they will input all of their information in, and then that information will automatically feed into the Step Forward website. So when the student leaves CCC Apply and moves over to Step Forward to understand the things that they need to do, their information will be automatically populated. The system is also set up that, say, a student receives a collateral material and isn't ready to register or wants to check it out before they register, they can come online, go directly to the website, and choose the college that they're looking at and understand what the rules are at the college. So not only is this website integrated into CCC Apply to grab all of that information, it also links to local college websites, because we all know the colleges have a variety of different ways that they achieve orientation, education planning, that sort of thing. So it was really important that in addition to the umbrella information that these are the things that you need to do, that we needed to tell them, okay, but this is exactly what you need to do at your local college that applies to you. So that was really, really important. The campaign itself features student photography. So these are photos that were taken by students. Student videography, so videos that were taken by students, real students at real community colleges. So all of the photos that you see everywhere taken by a student includes a student and was taken at a community college. So that was really great as well, that the team was able to travel around to the different colleges and really highlight their students and their campuses through this campaign. And many of the campuses, when they receive the materials, they say, hey, I know this student, I know this location. So that was really important. And then you can see here on this particular screenshot that we're trying to really connect the idea of priority registration to individual student goals and their motivation for finishing college. So it's not just, gosh, there are 3 more things that you need to do to get the classes that you want, but why these things are really important and why these things are going to help you reach your goal and meet your priorities. So this particular picture, you can see this is Rebecca P. She's her field of study is communications, and her priority is being the first in my family to graduate college. And so if you can envision the live site, these are scrolling, and there are a number of students with various priorities in various fields of study. So students can come on and kind of get the idea, oh, I see why this is important. So the first step is orientation, and when a student comes onto the live website, they can actually see an overview of all 3 steps, all in one view. And then there are click-throughs for them to get additional information about each of the steps. So step 1 is orientation. There's a very brief overview of why orientation is important. It allows you to learn about financial aid, registration, tutoring, helping you adjust to your new college. You can see over to the right, this particular college is American River College. There's a link to American River College website where they can read more about what orientation looks like at American River, and they have a map there to show them how to get to American River College. The next step is assessment, and the assessment, again, gives you a brief overview, helps you choose the courses that are at the right level for you. So you don't want to take courses that are too difficult that you're unable to complete. You don't want to take classes that are below your skill level. So the assessment is really, really important. The other part of the assessment that is a really neat feature is that this section of the website features a wizard. So this wizard goes through a series of questions, and the student answers the questions, and depending on the college that they've chosen and how they answer the questions, it will tell the student whether or not they need to take an assessment. So you can see on the right hand, the first question in the wizard is, do you already have a college degree? Student answers yes or no. Runs through a series of a couple of questions like this. Then they click through and it says, okay, based on the way that you've answered these questions and the college that you've chose, here are your results, whether your a math placement test or an English placement test is required or not. If you scroll down even further, you can see again another link to American River College and assessment resources that are available for the student to meet those particular needs. Finally, the third step is education planning. And so again, they get a brief overview why education planning is important, that you really need to identify the courses that are required to meet your goals. So you're identifying your priority, really stating this is what I want to do, and then do your ed plan to make sure that you're taking the right classes to meet your needs. We have a link again to the counseling section at the particular community college so they can learn more about what resources are available to them. We've also provided a number of links here to other system-wide resources. So there's a link to Salary Surfer that they can look at, I want to be a communications major. What have other community college students, what are they earning now with communication degrees? We've also provided a link to Career Cafe, which offers career counseling services. They can look at different career paths. They can do skills assessments and say, well, I chose communications based on how I answer different questions about my interests and my skills. Is that the right career for me? So you can see as we built the website, we really focused on providing overarching information, statewide information that applies to all, but really doing a comprehensive scan of what other tools and resources are out there that we can link to, not recreate the wheel in the website, but we can direct the student to make this particular website more robust. So that was the integration and the linkage to existing resources was really, really important to us as we were developing this. And then finally, I want to talk a little bit about sustainability because, we do a lot of projects that are funded by philanthropy. And we all know philanthropy is fairly fickle. A lot of times you'll get funded for a project and then, you're moving on to the next project. It's not very often that philanthropy will continue to fund operations of what you've built. So integration was core, sustainability was really core to the process throughout. So if you think about this, we've had this significant change in what students are required to do for priority registration, and there's this initial period where we need to get the word out and students need additional resources. Down the road, you can kind of envision, it really becomes the fabric of the community colleges and kind of what students do and people start to know. So the sustainability around this is really looking at how do we take what we've built here and integrate it into the existing student services portal? So there are already existing resources where students can go onto the Chancellor's Office website or the .cccco website and obtain a number of resources. So when we were building this with the idea that this would then just integrate into that portal and live on from there. The other thing that was really important is that I talked about all of this print material. You can also envision that it's going to be really important for a period of time. Some colleges may start to develop their own. Some colleges may really want to continue to use this. So we wanted to create something that students could that colleges could request on demand. So we've made the assets available digitally. So colleges can either call us, we can print them and we can ship them out, or the colleges can go online, download the digital image, and they can go print their own posters and flyers and that sort of thing and put them out on campus. So we're really proud of this project and what's been developed here. And I want to end by saying a couple of, repeating a few acknowledgments. Again, I really want to thank and acknowledge Paul Feast for his leadership in this effort. He was right there with us along the way, providing both thought leadership and the boots on the ground, roll up our sleeves. This wasn't a project that we consulted out. Most of the work was done in-house with this team, so there were a lot of meetings with the team sitting around the table hashing this out and coming up with the creative, and so a lot of work went into this. Paul Feast and his colleague Paige, and then Brian Miller and Melissa Connor from my shop were really did a lot of work on this. And it's really kudos to the team for this award-winning resource that will really benefit the California community colleges and students as we work through this transition. So with that, that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for sharing this with us. I'll start with Member Baca.
Yeah, you know, those of us that share responsibility for establishing or creating education policy, and those that are charged with implementing it at the colleges, come up with some really fantastic and great ideas. And we think that it's just going to work magically in some way or another just by virtue of us putting it on the books. This goes a long way to actually getting the things that we want to have happen to happen. I mean, communication with students is critical. Keep pressing upon them the opportunities and the processes that are needed. You know, our admission staff and at the campuses get the same question over and over again. After a while, we say, well, everybody should know this just by virtue of it just is the thing. But students don't understand the bureaucracy coming in by generally speaking. And so efforts like this go a long way to ensuring that they do. And so I commend you. I think this is a really great project to put together.
Thank you.
Member Reed?
The Kresge Foundation has been a long-term funder of the foundation. I'm just curious, have they shown any interest in maybe taking this to the next step, as you were talking about this new portal and furthering this effort?
Yeah, so we're continuing to cultivate that relationship and determine kind of the what's next with Kresge. They have been a long-time funder. They helped fund us for some activities during the OSHER campaign. That was really important as we named Student Success our flagship fundraising initiative. This project kind of rose to the top as something they were really interested in. So we will definitely continue to work with Kresge. Just the question is, what is the thing that we go to them as the next big thing? We feel like with this particular project that we have a sustainability plan that will work, that maybe we might need some funding for. But Kresge has shown the capacity to fund us at a different level, and so we want to make sure that our subsequent ask to Kresge is, meets kind of their desire for what they might want to fund next. And as we're moving into workforce development and that task force, I could envision maybe something bubbling up out of those activities. But we're continuing to form that.
Member Azumi?
Thank you. I just wanted to give the newer members of the Board of Governors a little bit of historical perspective. This is a terrific program, and I second everything that Member Baca said initially. As the Board of Governors representative on the Foundation Board and Vice Chair of the Foundation Board, in having served for 10 years on the Board of Governors, I think it's really quite incredible to see, the evolution of the foundation and their work over that time. I know that when Member Reed and I were first on the Board of Governors many years ago, would have been really impossible to think that the foundation would have been, doing this type of really impactful type of work that would, really hit the lives of, so many individual students, as Member Baca pointed out. But I think that, under President Mills' administration and the team that she's put together there, it really is, not only fabulous that the foundation is doing this work, but it's also in comparison to, what the foundation was like 10 years ago, is really a night and day experience for me as a longtime Board of Governors member to see this type of evolution. And I think it's a real compliment to the foundation and the leadership, but also to the focus that all of us now have on issues like student success. That that we now are able to put our energies into this focus and are able to put the resources that we need to gather up to ensure that students have the best chance to succeed. And again, my compliments, and it's a great privilege to be a part of the foundation board as well as the Board of Governors.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing this update. Member Sumner.
I was just thinking about how important this would be to get out to the libraries. I was just, and if there's an opportunity, if they wanted to order them or something, because I was just thinking we just had a Veterans Coalition meeting, and it's about with the colleges and the libraries just really working closely with us. That if they had this there, I mean, you can reach down to the high schools, but even the junior highs, because everybody wants to go out and look at a website, so maybe that would be another outreach to get more information out there, would be to the libraries.
Yeah, it's a great idea. Thank you.
Member Van Loon.
Yes, how exactly is the Step Forward campaign integrated into CCC Apply? Is it merely a link, a textual link, or?
So my understanding is that at the end of the process, when a student goes in to enroll, at the end of that process, it will say something like, congratulations, you've completed the process, and then direct them, now please go visit the Step Forward website to learn more about how to get the classes that you need, and it will provide them a link to link over. And then all of the information that is in CCC Apply then transfers over into Step Forward, so that when the student gets there, they're recognized on the Step Forward website, and they know, okay, this is the college that the student is enrolled in, and this is their field of study or what they've declared.
Okay, I say that just because having merely a text link I don't think is sufficient. I think something more visual and visually appealing would be beneficial, and also through that visual display, articulating that this will hasten and facilitate their journey throughout their educational career. Otherwise, you're not going to maximize the amount of hits on the website. Students just frankly won't go and take that link.
Absolutely. That's terrific input. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I only have one question, too. In addition to just sending colleges a box of information, what kind of training are you engaging in? Because it's only as good as if people go and use it.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. We've been to a number of conferences. So there's an annual student success type conference. I think there's a couple of them. So we've been to all of those where the administrators all come together. There have been a number of communications that have gone out to the PIOs and various groups at the colleges. And then as we were going through this process, we engaged a number of focus groups throughout the process. So as we were building it, we were kind of communicating and working with folks along the way. So it had a lot of groundswell from the beginning that folks knew it's coming, and here's what it is. And they had a lot of input into what it should be and how it came together. So we had a lot of awareness around it.
So it's mostly through conferences, and then I presume through listservs and things like that at the counseling community. But you're confident the counseling community is well aware of this tool and they're actually helping students implement it?
Yes, absolutely. And the training for how the college actually implements, I think, happens more technically by the chancellor's office. So our job was really to get the word out that this resource is available, and to your point, make sure that they're using this resource in their work to advise students.
And have you been able to evaluate, is there higher levels of usage in certain districts as opposed to others?
That's a good question. My technology team could probably answer that question, so I could get that for you, but I don't know the answer at this moment.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
You bet.
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
On to the next item, state and federal legislative update. Vice Chancellor, Chancellor.
Thank you, President Baum, members of the board. As we try to do periodically, especially this time of year, provide you an update on the state legislative and the federal legislative activities. And today, Vince Stewart, Vice Chancellor of Governmental Affairs, is here to do just that. Vince?
Great. President Baum, members of the board, and Chancellor. I'd like to start my update first by thanking President Baum for the very kind words at the beginning of the meeting, and just would like to acknowledge that that is a group effort. I had a lot of assistance from the Vice Chancellors and also my staff in assisting with the confirmation and with that legislative reception, but thank you nonetheless. I know that in your packets you had received a summary of both state and federal legislation through about the end of December. Also passed out at your desk is a couple of additional items for your background, and the one that I'm going to be speaking from with respect to the state legislative update is a document that looks like this. It's a bill matrix. However, before getting into that, I would like to summarize briefly the board-sponsored legislation around dual enrollment. As you might recall, in November, brought an item before you to have the board sponsor dual enrollment legislation. That is moving forward, and we're currently working with Assemblymember Chris Holden from the Pasadena area and his staff to develop legislative language. My expectation is that that legislation will be introduced in the next couple of weeks, and we'll bring that back to you with more detail. In terms of the 3 or 4 bills that have been introduced here in the last couple of weeks, I wanted to highlight a few of them to you because based on past precedent, we are supportive of these measures. These were issues that had been brought to the legislature before, and we had prior support positions. So the first is Assembly Bill 13, and this is legislation that would fix state statute, if you will, to allow for in-state tuition for veterans. We had legislation that passed last year that was a partial fix, but this would be a complete fix. So that bill has been introduced. In addition, there's legislation AB 82, which deals with driver's license. And this bill would allow for the registration of selective service at the same time as someone would register for their driver's license. And this is something that we have supported in the past as well. And then there's Senate Bill 66 by Senator Connie Leyva. This legislation would fund the career technical education programs that were previously funded by Senate Bill 1070 and Senate Bill 70 from 4 or 5 years ago. So this is a continuation of that program and would seek to utilize the funding in the governor's budget proposal for that purpose. And then the last one I would like to highlight is SB 114 by Senator Carol Liu, and this is legislation that would put a school facilities bond on the ballot. This is somewhat different from an initiative that has been circulating that is also seeking to put a bond on the ballot. That petition would put funding in place for K-12 and community colleges. Senator Liu's legislation would cover K-12 community colleges, the UC and the CSU. So we're relatively early on in the legislative session, so there isn't a lot to report back on bills, but we'll have much more in future meetings to share with you. I think I would like to pause there and see if you had any questions about other bills that were summarized or on this matrix.
Member Belensky.
The SB 42 Liu bill that would change the Commission on Higher Ed Performance from CPEC to this new one, what would that do exactly, since CPEC isn't in existence at the moment?
Right. So that's a comprehensive piece of legislation to recreate a CPEC-like organization. It would change the membership, and it would also change the oversight authority of the Commission over the public segments of higher education. As you might recall, last year, former Assembly Speaker Perez had similar legislation. We were probably the most significant issue we had with that bill was the lack of segmental representatives on the panel, and that continues in this bill as well.
Continues. And what's the likelihood that SCA 1 about legislative control of the University of California going through the full process?
I generally try to refrain from forecasting the passage of bills, but that's one that's come up several times in the past and has not been successful.
Since the title looks intriguing, what is SB 54? From Walters.
At this point, it is just a spot bill, so we have a call into the author's office to find out what their intention is, but based on what's in print, we really cannot tell.
I'm going to give you all a raise.
Well, I think that's it.
To abolish the Board of Governors. Member Reed?
I had a quick question for you. I've been here so long, I guess I'm recycling myself. But the question I have is that there was a point in time when this board decided that the Board of Governors would not take a position on legislative bills, that it would be done so by the systems office. Is that still in place? Do you recall? Remember what we did?
Right.
Well, you weren't here then, but I mean.
Right. So the policy predates me, but in a nutshell, what it says is that if there is past precedent, so the board had taken a position on a bill, and that bill is reintroduced, then the standing policy says that we can take the same position if the bill is substantially the same. So that's one option. If due to time constraints, so a bill has been introduced and it is set for hearing and there isn't time to bring it back to the Board of Governors for discussion and for a formal position, the Chancellor can take a position in order to meet that time constraint and then bring it back to the board for formal action. And then there is part of the standing order where if we have not had a position on legislation, it's entirely new, then we would bring it to the board for discussion and the board could then vote on a position.
Thank you.
Any further questions about the state legislative? Okay, moving on to the.
So on the federal update, again, in your binder, we included what was done through about the mid to late December. However, I did pass out a couple of fact sheets that are outlining the President's recent announcement on January the 9th for his American College Promise, and then the fact sheet that was released on the 17th of January, which is essentially the tax reform initiatives that would go in part to pay for that proposal. You might have seen that our office put out a brief press statement, I think generally acknowledging support or praise, if you will, for the administration in the idea of providing free of tuition anyways for community colleges for the first 2 years. I think there right now is very little detail around that proposal, so it's difficult to say yes, this is something that we can jump on board entirely without knowing, one, what are the requirements upon the students in terms of either their academic progress. There was, I think, some description in the press release about needing to maintain a 2.5 GPA. There are also requirements on the colleges in terms of the types of programs that they offer, and whether or not, for instance, the programs that we're doing around CTE or the associate degree for transfer could potentially qualify. So that's a pretty long-winded way of saying that I think we need to see more of the details, and hopefully some of those will emerge this evening in the President's State of the Union address, and I think later on about what the program requirements will be. And then I think the same will hold true for the funding proposals and the degree to which the proposal to close some corporate tax loopholes and raise taxes on higher income earners to help pay for what I think is a $60 billion price tag over a decade for that particular initiative. But I think at a minimum it elevates the conversation nationally around the contributions of community colleges, certainly the importance of providing folks access to our systems like it across the country, to both get the training they need for workforce as well as the opportunity to earn their associate's degree and move on to baccalaureate degrees.
Any question? Chancellor, I've obviously got a lot of questions when the President made that announcement. Wanted to get your sense of the feedback and response that you've received.
Yes, we have. We've had a tremendous amount of media attention, as you can imagine, on this particular issue, and obviously we've been very supportive in concept of the idea, as Vice Chancellor Stewart pointed out. Unfortunately, at this point, the entire thing's a little bit light on details, so it gets hard to get too far out, and especially the tax proposal that would support this financially. The cost is estimated to be somewhere in the neighborhood of $60 billion over the next decade. That has just come out in the last 48 hours, and so we're bound to hear more about that tonight. But I have been, I've tried to be very supportive of the idea, and because I really, I think we all generally believe that the cost of higher education in America, the fees to go to college is but a small part of that. And our students are facing, especially in California, tremendous living expenses to go to college. And one of the things that this proposal does is encourage students to attend more full-time, or certainly at least half-time. And we know that our students face real tremendous hurdles to get an education if they have to work 2 or 3 jobs to do so. So if this proposal were to reduce the barriers of cost to higher education, we believe it would translate into a greater number of students being successful in college, and that's good not only for the students, but for California and America. So we're very supportive in concept of the President's proposal. The media certainly has been very interested in it, and I think you will see this evening more details and in coming weeks.
Member Belinsky, did you? No. Well, thank you. One quick update on federal level, too, though. You've been participating in a task force on regulation of higher education on a national level.
I have, and that report is scheduled to come out soon. The bipartisan leadership in the Senate and the Congress that formed that group really does want to break down some of these barriers our colleges face in terms of horrendous reporting burdens at the federal level. And so it's too early to tell what that's going to look like, but I really do believe Senator Alexander was driving that, and he really encouraged us not to throw the kitchen sink in there, to find the top half-dozen regulations that really make it challenging for our colleges and to ask for reform on those. And so things like the Clery Act, which require tremendous reporting, some of the financial aid reporting, the ability to benefit reporting, those things that just are onerous burdens on our colleges are what that task force has been focused on.
Look forward to hearing more about that.
Just a couple of other items, unless there are more questions on what I've already said. So a couple of things I just wanted to mention related to Senator Alexander. I know that he has mentioned, and he's the chair of the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee in the United States Senate. He's indicated that he wants to see reauthorization of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act in the first 6 months of this Congress. I think that likely could bode well for reauthorization of the Higher Education Act, which is something that I know some of us will be going back to Washington, D.C. the second week of February to advocate on that, as well as other issues around veterans and Pell Grants and so forth. So I suspect at your March meeting we'll have more to report back on our federal activity. And then the last thing I'll mention that was included in the handouts is really for your reference. We've put together a roster of state senators and state assembly members. That roster indicates which community colleges reside within their legislative districts, and it also gives you just a quick little blurb, a line or two about their affiliation or connection to a community college. So as you're out and about and you're encountering these members, I think this is a good reference tool for you to kind of get a sense as to where their work intersects with ours.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that report. Item 4.3, the governor's budget proposal. Chancellor.
Thank you, President Baum, members of the board. As I mentioned in my comments at the beginning of the meeting, it was a great day to be in California community colleges last week between the governor and the President of the United States. And here to give you an update on the financial side from California's perspective is Vice Chancellor Troy Dan.
Yes, thank you, Chancellor Harris, President Baum, members of the board. I've been in this position now about 4 years. And as I commented the other day when I was at the ACA and ACBO workshop, that apparently that's all it takes to see the best and worst in this system. 4 years is all it takes. So I look forward to seeing what the next 4 years brings as well. Fortunately, we are definitely on the positive side of those trends these days, as the governor announced his budget on January 9th. With an improving economy and the infusion of Prop 30 tax revenues having a particular benefit to the Prop 98 guarantee, the governor did announce on January 9th that he sees the K-14 guarantee growing about 8% over the current year. So that's on top of an already very significant increase that we received from 13-14 to 14-15. So indeed, we are experiencing a relatively strong budget times this year. Specifically, what the governor's proposal would mean for community colleges is laid out in your, I hope you all have this handout now that we just provided today. Obviously, the governor's budget comes out well after our deadlines for getting the agenda ready, but we do have some information for you to look at now. I'll start on page 2 of it as we detail the benefits of the community colleges in this budget. First off, since some of you may ask, I'll go ahead and tell you that no, there are no fee increases.
Which document are you referring to?
It is.
Oh, okay.
Do we all have it?
It's, let's give everybody a chance to pull it up. So everybody, it was distributed today?
Distributed today,
Everybody has
correct.
it?
That looks like it, yeah.
Okay. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so I'm starting with page 2. I'd like to follow along. So again, there's no proposed fee increases, so the fees stay the same for our students. The governor's proposal is, again, very strongly aligned with our system budget request and positions supported by this office and board in recent years to support student success and student access. And you can see that trend continues with this with a proposed increase of $200 million for student success. So that would be split equally, $100 million for the Student Success and Support Program and an additional $100 million for the Student Equity Plans funding, which were funded in the current year. The governor also proposes a general purpose base increase of $125 million. This is something that we strongly advocated for, both in the system budget request and in our discussions with finance. As you know, during the recession, our system went 5 years without COLAs. That greatly reduced the purchasing power of our districts as they attempt to meet salary obligations, utility costs, healthcare costs, et cetera. So this is a very generous increase for districts as they try to recoup that breathing room and restore their purchasing power. And that's particularly important as we look ahead to the increases in STRS and PERS contributions that districts will face in future years. They do need those discretionary dollars in order to meet those coming obligations. The governor proposes a roughly 2% increase in access for our system. We estimate that would fund about 45,000 students on a head count basis. The statutory COLA is estimated at 1.58%. We received $92 million to fund that. You might recall in the 14-15 legislation passed concurrently with the 14-15 budget increased the funding rate for our CDCP programs from roughly $3,300 per FTS to the resident rate of roughly $4,700.
What is
so,
CDCP?
Career Development College Prep. So these are non-credit courses, but since they're aligned with career prep, they have received an enhanced funding rate. This would equalize them to the credit rate. So the cost of implementing that is about $49 million of bringing all those current courses up to the higher rate. The governor proposes to continue funding the SB 1070 Career Tech Pathways Program at the tune of $48 million. Increases funding for apprenticeship of about $29 million. About $14 million of that would essentially restore the rates and the seats in those programs to where they were prior to the recession. And then there's another $15 million added on top to fund innovative new programs that focus on new and emerging industries. We receive another allotment of fundings for Prop 39 projects, a little over $39 million for that. Additionally, in taking a look at the revenue streams for the current year, the governor has found that the Proposition 98 guarantee for the current year has been significantly underfunded. So he proposes money to meet the current year obligations. The first call on those dollars was to permanently retire our year-over-year system deferrals. That is a significant accomplishment to retire that. You might recall the day before Prop 30 passed, the system deferrals was $961 million, almost 17% of our total system-wide apportionment was deferred year over year. With this proposal, it would be that deferral would be entirely eliminated. The governor also proposes a one-time block grant to pay down district outstanding mandate claims. So these are mandate obligation reimbursements that the districts have filed with the state controller over several years to meet required provisions of law. The governor proposes a block grant to retire a lot of those obligations. Now, it would go out on a per FTS basis. So even if you did not have outstanding obligations or you had very little, you would still get a per FTS allocation. It's just to the extent that you have obligations, these dollars would retire those obligations on the state books. So that's something I wanted to make clear. In addition to these community college specific proposals, there is a very major policy change proposed for adult education for the K-14 world. The governor proposes a $500 million adult education block grant to fund the AB 86 consortiums that K-12 and community college districts have formed regionally in recent years to develop a plan to provide adult education services to the residents of those regions. In the first year, the governor proposes that the first call on dollars would be to hold K-12 adult education programs harmless. They've been required to expend at the level of expenditures for adult education that they were funding as of the 12-13 year over these 2 years of the AB 86 planning grants. The governor says in the first year, the first call will be to hold them harmless, keep that funding in there. The remainder of those dollars of the $500 million would go out according to need as determined by this office in conjunction with the superintendent of public instruction. In subsequent years, there'd be no obligation to hold K-12 districts harmless for the MOE. It would simply go out based on need, again, as determined jointly with by the chancellor's office and the superintendent of public instruction. Obviously, this is a very major initiative. Chancellor Von Quinlivan and her staff have worked very hard on the AB 86 legislation over the past couple of years to try to provide recommendations that make this program work the best for those who need adult education services at our state. So we'll remain closely involved in discussions as this moves forward. Just a couple of words about some of the other public education entities in our state. K-12 also similarly benefits very well from the increase in the Prop 98 guarantee. Their funds would be up to about almost $9,700 per ADA under the governor's proposal. They were at about $7,000 per ADA in 2011 and 12, so that is very rapid progress in that world. UC and CSU are each proposed to receive increases of 4%, so that is somewhat, that's about half of what community colleges and K-12 are receiving. That does reflect the fact that, as I mentioned, a lot of these revenues that are coming in to the state primarily benefit Prop 98 guarantees. So the revenues come in, it increases the obligations to fund K-14 education, and it does not necessarily leave a lot of other revenues outside of Prop 98 to restore other general fund supported programs in the state. There are certainly differences in how different entities of government are being restored as these revenues come into play. At the risk of inciting any further irrational exuberance, the LEO last week did their initial take on the budget, and they do have the benefit of an additional month of revenues to take a look at than what the Department of Finance did. So they had those December revenues to look at, and that is a very key month for state income tax collection. And their analysis is that there may even be another $1 billion or $2 billion out there that the governor did not account for in his plan. Now, we certainly have seen the LEO and the governor disagree on revenue projections in recent years, and generally the governor wins those discussions. But we'll have to see what Department of Finance, how they assess the situation when they get to their May revision. Clearly this is a very, very strong budget for community colleges and for K-14 education. And certainly reflects the state's priority on having the first call for those dollars go toward education. I did want to point out, as I mentioned in my opening, again, 4 years ago we were having very, very different discussions. We were looking at severe and very painful cuts to this system and to K-12 education as well. And 4 years from now, who knows where we could be. Prop 30 revenues start to phase out in the coming years. In 2016, the sales tax provision goes away. 2 years later, the income tax provision goes away. If you listen to economic forecasters, we're about 7 years into an economic recovery. Roughly the average cycles suggest that every 7 to 9 years we have another recession. So enjoy the good times while we're here. No, none of that is to be negative, but it is to remind us all that to the extent that we get these discretionary dollars, we have to save some of our acorns for the winter. Districts do have those PERS and STRS obligations upcoming. That we estimate that those combined increased contributions in the coming years will tally about $400 million system-wide. That's a very significant burden that districts will have to face. So they need to start preparing for that right now and not overcommit to other expenditures before we see another downturn. Districts also have significant OPEB liabilities out there that they now have to identify through the GASB provisions. So that's would probably be wise for districts that have large liabilities to think about retiring those obligations, or at least coming up with a plan to do so. So we'll provide more details as they become available. The governor, typically on February 1st, has to release what is known as their trailer bill. So that's a statute that provides much more specifics about how a lot of these programs actually work. So we will have more detail at that time. And certainly this is just the beginning of the process. In February, the ledge analysts will have a much more thorough review of the budget. The legislature will begin their review. May revision will come that can rejigger the revenues. We've seen very dramatic differences between January and May in the past, so we'll have to keep our eyes out for that. And then hopefully we'll have a final budget in June, and we'll be able to tell you all a lot more good news. So thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chancellor Troy. Chancellors, are there any other comments you'd like to make?
Well, the only thing I would add is that I really want all of us to take seriously the cautions that Dan provided at the end. It is our job as leaders of this system to, on the one hand, when things are going in a downward trend, to reassure folks that we will make it through that. Unfortunately, it's also our job when things are getting better to caution people about being overly confident in the future, because as Dan pointed out, there are a couple of revenue clouds on the horizon, and there are horrendous funding requirements in the future for STRS and PERS and unfunded liabilities, restoration of categorical programs, needs for faculty. There just are a myriad of calls on these dollars. And unfortunately, when things get like this, people think, oh, all of our problems are solved, and nothing could be further from the truth. So I appreciate what Dan has said, and I would just underscore the cautions for the future.
Thank you, Chancellor. Before we go to board member deliberations, Vice President Estolano, are there any members of the public who wish to address the board?
Yeah, we have two. We have Fabio Gonzalez and we have Richard Hansen.
Fabio Gonzalez, EOPS Association Board President. Good afternoon, Chancellor Harris, Board President Baum, and honorable board members. Happy New Year. I think this is a great transition, especially your comments, Chancellor Harris. They're right on target. I think when our system goes through challenging times, we tend to tighten up our belts and really just pick ourselves up and work together on making sure we get through those difficult times. And this system proved it back in 2008, 2009. And many of us had to tighten up our belts, tell our students the difficulties of the challenges that we were facing with the economical downturn. And we have to really share that message to them. The EOP&S community is grateful to the governor for his overall commitment to community colleges, but very distressed at being overlooked in the 2005-2016 budget again. The governor's philosophy of local control produced little or no success in seeking funding for EOP&S due to competing priorities. The number of students seeking support from EOP&S continues to increase, and something must be done to address this issue. On behalf of our association, I want to emphasize to you as members of this board that EOPS is in your budgetary value statement reflected on your own BCP. We hope that you will exercise leadership with the governor's office in explaining the value of EOPNS and develop an alternate funding approach. EOPS will be taking its message to the Capitol, but wants to work with the Chancellor's office, with the Chancellor, this board in a cooperative way. We hope to count on your leadership and continued support on making sure that EOPNS is not overlooked in this upcoming year. In conclusion, I want to personally thank Chancellor Harris for reaching out to our association, having a conversation, letting us know about his frustration and how he shares the common goals that we have. And also, welcome Dr. Nalden. We're looking forward to working with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Richard Hansen.
Good afternoon, Rich Hansen. I'm back to represent the Community College Independents. And no doubt about it, this is a great budget, a lot of opportunity for us, funding for student success efforts, student services. Looking to the future, I know we're trying to do it. I hope that we can be successful, that we have a pretty solid foundation on per FDES instructional funding. We've got to make the case that this funding that's coming now for student services needs to be permanent in the same way. Colleges out there are nervous. They think about this money as one time because we all know that when things begin to go south, these are the first areas that are cut. And that mentality has to change if this state really is serious about student success and equity. And it's along those lines that I want to make a few other comments. Our budget change proposal did include in it $70 million for conversion of part-time faculty to full-time faculty positions. We need to start making progress toward the 75% goal that we all support, but have never made any progress since it was instituted. That's not in the budget. But there is a place where the governor makes reference to it. It's in the $125 million. So again, just like the prior speaker's comments, it's a matter of priorities. And I do hear from a lot of folks we didn't hear from in the past about the huge need for more full-time faculty because there are so many more demands. There is a faculty role in student success that can't be denied. And it's not just full-time, but also part-time faculty. Our budget change proposal requested restoration of the categoricals. Those include EOPS, as you just heard, programs like that, but also part-time line items, office hours, which are crucial to student success. Healthcare benefits, which maybe are tangential, but when you have your healthcare taken care of, you can do a lot more to serve your students. Same thing also for compensation in general. There's a parity line item to try to equalize on a pay for the work done basis to equalize full-time and part-time compensation. These are all components of the same thing. And there is flexibility, as I said, with the full-time conversion issue, but there's flexibility for these part-time issues in the equity funding. There's also flexibility there for the categoricals. I just finished an article on the equity plan for the Facts Journal, and there's a lot of language in all of the work leading up to the equity plans that there be cooperation between the existing programs and the new ones that are going to be funded with this additional money. I'm not so sure that's happening out there in the field. We've got to make sure that that starts to happen. So thank you very much. I think there will be more to be done on this budget. Chancellor, we will try to protect what we've been able to get so far, but there are some other interests that we do want to address. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ray. Are there any other comment cards? Member Reed and then Member Baca.
The question I had on a larger basis on the budget, is there any proposed pay down on the existing debt that the state's carrying? I know we're talking about a balanced budget and new funding, but what are we doing to address the existing debt issue?
I think the governor would tell you that he is paying down quite a bit of debt through a retiring mandate obligations and the like. Part of what's going on with the Prop 98 guarantees too is that we've over the years accumulated what they call maintenance factors. So these are dollars eventually owed to districts when the guarantee has been funded at lower levels. So the governor is retiring that obligation to that extent. And we have seen a plan passed last year to retire the STRS deficit over a 30-year period. And the governor has announced, though I don't think he's released any details at this point, to address the state employee health care obligations. So it sounds like they're working on a plan to look at that as well. So I think it's fair to say that significant progress has been made in retiring states' obligations.
I know Dan did mention it earlier, but keep in mind the governor in our budget has recommended the last 90+ million of a $900 million credit card balance that we had from deferrals. So it is wonderful, assuming this budget passes, to have that credit card completely paid off, because as Dan points out, if you go into another dip 5-7 years from now, a really bad one, you need to have the ability to do what they've done before. So I was frankly surprised how fast they paid it off. In 2.5 years, they've wiped it all out.
Just about.
For us, and it was nearly $900 million. So that is remarkable.
Member Baca?
Yeah, this budget obviously is exceptional. I mean, it's very, very good. But as we look at it in terms of the funding formula and the way that it's perceived in the field, it was mentioned just now by Richard that the field tends to look at things in ways that we may not anticipate or fully expect. And, in particular, as we looked at the student success and equity funding, I have a growing awareness that colleges are implementing it in some instances as a categorical monies that are going to be something much more similar to the federal funding, where you get 3-5 years and that's it, as opposed to maybe something like EOPS that has been around for as long as it's been around and been very effective, which, by the way, I think we have to be really careful that when we make decisions on programs, particularly when we address issues pertaining and funding pertaining to EOPS and DSPNS, that we not just take it lightly, because these programs have been very successful, and so it isn't just simply saying, well, we'll just translate it into something else, because that's not gonna work well. And so we need to continue to support those efforts. But I'm very concerned with the field looking at these in multiple ways, and that has got to be a concern for us. Is student success and equity funding a categorical program that's going to sunset shortly or not? I'll let you respond to it, Chancellor. But the other thing that I'd like to have us take another look at, and I suspect that maybe at our next meeting we'll have a student equity discussion. But the funding there, and it's moving along. I know that we have, just because of the nature of funding and so forth, that maybe there's some lag time there, and we'll just catch up on it. But of course, student equity funding is very important, because if we're going to have student success actually achieved in the way that is very inclusive, we have to be aware of the equity concerns. And I'll just kind of leave it at that.
Other members?
If I could make a comment to that, I hope we can make it very clear to the field that it's very much the intention of the governor and the legislature to provide these funds on an ongoing basis. These are not short-term programs. The SSSP and student equity are intended to be ongoing programs, and certainly with all the work that our districts are going to developing their plans and hiring counselors, so to speak, that there's no intent, certainly through our advocacy, to do anything different but than to communicate that these are permanent funds. Now, certainly, can they be cut a little bit in a downtime when we get to another economic recession? Certainly, everything can be on the table at that point, but these are not meant to be short-term funds.
Member Avalos?
Vice Chancellor Troy, so what's the budget or proposed budget for EOPNS? I mean, do we have that data?
Yes, it's 76 million.
Thank you.
Is that,
I was going to say about 80 million. It's about 76 million, it sounds like.
okay, and that's proposed for this following year?
That's right. So the governor has not proposed an increase to that. It was cut, as many categoricals were cut back in 2009. It took about a 40% hit at that point. The governor and the legislature have chosen a few programs to restore or to augment in that time. But principally, the governor has preferred to fund more flexible categorical items where districts will have a little more flexibility in terms of how they address student needs, such as triple SP and student equity. But I think certainly looking forward at our advocacy efforts, I think particularly if we get to May and we do see more revenues on the table, we can look at things like funding EOPS, funding full-time faculty programs, conversion, and our professional development, which was another priority of this board.
So is a proposal to maintain it flat year over year?
Yeah, he's maintaining it flat.
Okay.
Well, one last comment that I would make. First off, thank you for the report. It is a very encouraging budget. Obviously, there's a lot of bridges to cross before it's a final budget. But it also indicates the confidence that the governor and the legislature have in our system, but also with these added resources and this added confidence comes tremendous responsibility. And I'm pleased that we have the funding for the technical resource and assistance unit to monitor how we are how our districts up and down the state are actually administering these resources, and it will provide that additional level of accountability and transparency in how these resources are done. So I'm hoping that plays into that, and I appreciate the caution that you've all expressed, and that this isn't there's a lot of potential challenges or reductions down the road if we don't continue to grow the economy too. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So the last item for today, because I don't think we'll take any of these tomorrow.
No, well, it depends on what time you finish. Probably we'll go ahead with the student success report, depending on when this presentation
Today?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Because that'll be September.
So we may squeeze in an extra item from tomorrow for today, if depending on how things flow. So I wanted to, Chancellor, we're going to take a look at transfer degrees, the final report on the SB 1440.
Thank you, President Baum, members of the board. I could wax philosophical for the better part of the rest of the day on the importance of the report you're about to receive. I'll let Pam give you the details, but I do want to say a word to our faculty and our academic leadership. You're going to see some numbers that, frankly, are stunning. The amount of work that's been done by our faculty and the faculty of the CSU, but especially our faculty over the last 2.5 years to fulfill the promise from the transfer degree legislation is remarkable. And I don't want that to go unnoticed by anybody. I have said to David and Julie and their colleagues repeatedly, I've said to this board, and I will continue to say, the fact that this has been accomplished, that this goal has been exceeded in the time it has, is nothing short of miraculous. So, Pam, it's a pleasure to ask you to give the board a report.
Thank you, Chancellor. President Baum, board members, Chancellor Harris, let me echo Chancellor Harris. David Morrison, Julie Bruno are sitting over here to my right, and we work so closely together in academic affairs, but this clearly is one of the most exciting opportunities that they could do. So I want to just congratulate you, really. And for encouraging their faculty across the state. So in your board package, you will see our final count of the associate degrees for transfer, ADTs. And so let me just give you a little backup again. Since signing the Student Transfer Achievement Reform Act in September of 2010, of course, a tremendous amount of work has been carried out by faculty and curriculum staff of our community colleges, as well as the Chancellor's Office Academic Affairs staff, to ensure the success. Today we have 1,668 active ADTs. That's that associate degree for transfer. And more than 100 are in development and review. There was an implementation and oversight committee. We call it the IOC. It was formed and laid the groundwork for the TMCs, that's that transfer model curriculum. The CID process was its course identification numbers coordination and that ADT. They continue to meet today. Training on TMCs, CID, and ADT's development began as early as December 2010 and occurred at least annually. We started to see the development of ADTs ramp up in early 2013. This is likely in response to the board challenge, our BOG challenge, to develop 100% of the ADTs in disciplines where there is a TMC. Each college set their goal and got to work. 92 colleges met their goal. 92 colleges met their goal. Collectively, we have met the system goal in early December 2014. On the last day we worked here in 2014, before the holiday began, before Christmas, we had people in our office trying to get that last little bit done. Everybody was challenged by this. One challenge that some colleges have, however, is continue to face is the effort to keep high unit majors such as computer science beneath the mandated 60 units for the ADT. Some found success by reducing their high unit courses, but not all have been able to take that route. All of that hard work is reflected in the more than 18,000 AAT or AST awarded to students who have taken advantage of the degree with a guarantee since 2011. Now, this is a wonderful document that we're showing you today. There's a new document in 2015 because we know our job is not done yet. We look forward to legally mandating development of the ADTs in disciplines offered by the college that have a TMC, and we're encouraged that students are finding an ADT pathway. So when I say that this particular document is completed, it's wonderful. That was called SB 1440. Now we have SB 440. So we're continuing the work of bringing all of those degrees together, and so I think I scared some of my colleagues last week when I said, well, you did 100%, and somebody said, well, how come I only look like I'm 62% now? Because we have to sort of start all over again. It's an ongoing process all the time. But I'm proud of everybody and the work they're doing, and it has been a tremendous effort. Thank you.
Thank you. Chancellors, anything you'd like to add to that?
Well, no, I would, did you pass this out, Pam? Is it out there places?
I don't think so. No.
Okay.
I'll get it.
Yeah, we need to get it out. It does graphically show the work of the faculty. But I do want to also underscore my appreciation for the staff in the Chancellor's office who were responsible for collecting these degrees, evaluating them, sending them back to the colleges when they needed to have changes made, and then they came back in some cases 2 or 3 times before they met the standards that we had all agreed to follow. So it has been a very challenging activity, and the colleges really stepped up, and our staff certainly did their job. It's a wonderful program, and I would remind you that in the first year these degrees were available, a few of them, we had about 800 students that earned them. In the second year, again, while they're still in development, we had roughly 5,000 students that earned those degrees, and in the first year when they really are coming online, we've had more than 12,000 students that have earned these degrees. And as you heard earlier, we have yet to even publicize this up and down the state to a point where students really know these things exist. So I look for this number, the number of students earning these degrees, to skyrocket in the next few years, and ultimately for this to be the acceptable pathway to transfer from the community colleges to the CSU. Happy to answer your
Thank you,
questions.
Chancellor. Vice President Solano, are there any comment
I have
cards
no
on this
comment
topic?
cards on this topic.
I'll turn it to the board. Anybody have any questions or comments?
I do have a question. So thank you very much for the information. Obviously, we're doing great work. One data point that stands out is Los Angeles Southwest. They're at 17%. Can we have some information on that, please?
So part of this process is to make sure that all the particular players are involved at the college and are at the college. So Southwest has a brand new president. I will tell you that she was a vice president of instruction in her just previous job, so I know she's looking at it very carefully. They didn't have an articulation officer in place at the time that this was all going on. So they had some college processes that they need to put together. One of the things that, so we've all been in contact with their chancellor, with their vice president of instructional services, and with their college president. And my staff will be going down to Los Angeles to work with both LA Southwest and LA City so that we can make sure that they have their processes in place. We don't want to see this happen again, neither do they. So I think part of it was they just didn't have all the right people in place. They have most of the people in place today, and we're going to work very hard with them. So we're doing as many curriculum workshops as we can. Again, thanking my colleagues. We just did a CTE workshop this last week. Vontan Quinlivan put something together, so that would work with the faculty. We're doing as many workshops as we can, so if there are some situations in place where people might not have what they need on a campus, we can help provide that. And I would like to say that when we come back with this kind of document again, you will not see that with LA Southwest.
Member Baca?
Yeah, I know, with the exception of 2 or 3 places, you know, I'm reminded, you know, we've moved along a great, to a great place. I think it was 4 or 5 years ago that the Academic Center was holding workshops throughout the state, and it seemed like a tremendous amount of work, and you know, we'll see if we're going to get it, and a lot of dialogue, a lot of discussion, a lot of people attending there from the faculty ranks and from the administration of colleges, and it's great to see it after this period of time get to this place. I mean, we've had regular reports on this, and it's been moving in the right direction. We had a period there where, well, maybe we're not going to be able to achieve that, but to see this is great. It is just great, and I think, you know, with the exception of those 2 places, I know that we'll take care of that too.
And Erin's going to hand out some additional information. She is the developer of this particular form and really stays on top of everything. So this will give you a little more information about how this looks in graph form.
I will admit, in response to Dr. Baca's comment, I will admit that my first meeting as your chancellor, Gary Reed made it quite clear to me that in no uncertain terms that we really had set a goal and we probably ought to make it. And I sort of filed that away, so I appreciate what you're saying, Dr. Baca. It's true. But we made it.
Member Sumner.
When you were reviewing the applications for the bachelors, was this taken into review as far as their transfer?
Well, I think it was at least looked at. There were a variety of things that were looked at. But I wouldn't say that that was significant at this point. Now, remember that bachelor's degree is a pilot, so we could ooze out a little bit on all this other work as we get there, but that wasn't the significance of what the bill of the bachelor's degree said.
Okay, I was just curious.
We're working off of 2 sides of our system.
Member Van Loon.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, Chancellor Harris, we're seeing great growth with administering of all these degrees by year. I've heard a number of concerns from students as to whether or not they're going to have a spot at the CSU. There's wide concern surrounding that. I'm just wondering what the conversation is surrounding the impacted nature of the CSU at this point, and if we're having that conversation with, let's just say, Chancellor Tim White in regard to getting space for all these students, because it's going to be a drastic increase as we've seen, and I'm expecting it to continue to increase.
Member Van Loon, I couldn't agree with you more. If there's one thing that worries me most about the success of this program is that there won't be the seats available for our students. Now, yes, absolutely having conversations not only with Chancellor White but with President Napolitano about the 3 of us making a case in the legislature for more access for all of California higher education, because to offer a promise like this that then results in a student not having a seat is a hollow promise. And not only does it look bad for the CSU, but it reflects very poorly on us because we've been telling students this is the pathway to transfer. So you're going to see some numbers in the next report that suggest it's turning in the right direction, but truthfully, there needs to be a significant investment in available access at the CSU in order to accept the number of students that are going to come out of this program.
Okay, yeah, I just know that one reluctancy in students, going this particular path is the impacted nature of the CSU and whether or not they're going to get a spot.
That was a theme at the reception that was held a couple of weeks ago with the three leaders of the system, that they stand shoulder to shoulder in calling for investment in California public higher education so that we can fulfill that promise to those students who graduate with these degrees, because it will not serve us well if our students can't progress in their studies. Member Epstein.
I have a question about that. Is that there is not a local state university they can go to, or are there none in the whole state that they can get into?
A little both. Obviously, for the very, very common majors, it's probably more of a regionalized impact. But for more of the specific majors, it's a seat at all. And there are so many of the CSUs that are going to be impacted in these heavy majors that it will make it difficult even for students who's willing to travel in some of these common majors to find a seat anywhere.
It was to the point where my counterpart of the Cal State system even projected that, are we moving to a system where we are going to be primarily accepting transfer students to the exclusion of first-time freshmen, too? That they might have to rebalance their mission in such a way as a result. But thank you very much for this report. It was really tremendous work and something we're all very proud of, and something I mentioned specifically to the Senate Rules Committee and before the State Senate. Yeah, thank you. Okay, with my colleagues' permission, since we've moved through the agenda, I'm going to move something from tomorrow's agenda to today, and still with the hope that we may get out by 4 o'clock. And so we're not going to take a break. We're going to push forward if that's okay with everybody.
Slave driver.
And so we're going to take up item 4.6, the State of the System report, and going to turn to the Chancellor, who's going to present that item.
Thank you, President Baum, members of the board. Let me see if I can convert this to full screen. There we go. I am going to refer to the PowerPoint, but I'm also going to refer periodically to the report itself, which is in front of you. And let me provide a backdrop for this by reminding the board that this goes back to the old accountability reporting in California, which predates our Student Success Initiative and our scorecard. So we've been asking colleges to provide these data for quite some time, and morphed the original reporting from the old accountability report into the scorecard. And so this report is required of us annually and contains the indicators that show the fiscal environment in which we're operating. Obviously, the enrollment management of our system takes a look at the courses that we are offering and student performance indicators in a number of both rates and volumes. And then, of course, just to remind all of us, this report is required by the legislature, and it is our annual State of the System report. I will tell you that it's no secret to any of us that the funding challenges this system has experienced over the past 4 years, at least for now, seem to have turned in the right direction. You can see the total investment in our system is about $6.7 billion in the current year, and about $4 billion of that comes from the state's general fund. If you look at what that means to us, and again, you can follow along with most of these in the booklet, but you'll see that the funding per student from the general fund is still below what it was in 08-09. However, the funding, when you consider not only the general fund, but property taxes and student fees, is actually slightly higher than it was back in 08-09. Now, obviously, that then means that what you see between 08, 09, and today is a shifting from general fund to property taxes and some impact on student fees. When you look at the course sections offered, this is probably one of the most encouraging charts in the document as it relates to access. You'll see back in 07, 08, and 08, 09, which were our high water marks, that we had nearly 500,000 courses being offered, and that number dropped down to just less than 330,000 courses in the system in 12-13. Finally, in 13-14, as a result of Proposition 30's passage and funding for adding back some of those classes, we actually saw the impact of that. Further, when you look at the sections offered, you can see historically that we still have lost about 9.1% of our total offerings, with 9-10 being the base year. But finally, again in bolded there in 13-14, you see a 7.1% uptick in those numbers, which is certainly encouraging. Again, when you look at the total full-time equivalent students, you'll see that the annualized number has gone up in excess of 2 million, almost 2.1 million. It was down to about 2.079 million prior to that, and the annualized full-time equivalent students in the bottom chart you can see has gone up by about 15 or 16,000 statewide. Again, when you look at this unduplicated head count, you see finally us moving into the positive. Again, you see year after year of losses, and now quantifying 500,000 students that we've lost. In fact, in excess of 500,000 until we saw Prop 30 and began to restore that funding. This is a very interesting chart, which may be a little bit hard to see on the document, so I'd refer you to page 5 in the report, because I think it does bear looking at. If you look at the dark blue bar in 9-10 on the left and a corresponding bar in 13-14, what this shows you is that in 9-10, our high water mark, we had 84, a little more than 84 of every 1,000 adults 18 years and older in California attending a California community college. And then when you move to the right, you see that breakdown by ethnic group. And so if I can take you to the African American as an example, that shows you that 116.7 African Americans of every 1,000 African Americans over 18 in this state were enrolled in the California Community College. When you look to the right then at the 13-14, you can see the impact of the rationing of education, not only overall, where you see that it went from 84.3 down to 74.6 per 1,000 adults, just translated sort of numerically. In 9-10, about 1 out of every 11 Californians that were 18 and over were enrolled in one of our colleges. By the time we got to the bottom, and it did bottom out this year, that's just a little bit better than 1 out of every 14 adults. So you can see the denial of access as a result. The other thing you can see is how it impacted by race and ethnicity, because as you see, there are differences in the drop. Interestingly enough, one of the greatest impacts was on our Caucasian students, where it went from 71.3 per 1,000 adults in 9-10 to only 54.9 or 55 in 13-14. One encouraging note in this downturn was that the one group that held up and actually improved very slightly was our Hispanic students. You'll also see some other interesting numbers in here. Look at the difference in the multi-race reporting of our students in 9-10 compared to 13-14. So there's some interesting demographic shifts that are detailed in these numbers as well. But it's important to note that this is the first year in the last 5 that we have seen a flattening of that decline in access. And so the 74.6 number is almost identical to what it was last year, and that means that it appears to me that we have bottomed out and that it's likely to head back up. This is a very encouraging number. As we all know, the building blocks for degrees and certificates and transfer are course success rates. And if you look at 03-04 up to 13-14, you see a significant improvement. Now you may say, gee, Chancellor, only 2.5 or 3 points there, But keep in mind that for every percentage point that changes applied to an enrollment of 2.1 million students statewide, that's a lot more students successfully completing courses. This shows you a trend that we're most excited about. Even when our enrollment was declining and we had fewer and fewer students, we had a dramatic uptick in the number of annual awards. Now, part of this is driven by that program you just heard about. It's also driven by a tough economy and students realizing, you know, I'm lucky I got in this class. I better finish it and finish my degree or certificate or my seat won't be here. So if there is a silver lining, this certainly is that as it relates to the downturn we've experienced. And here you show that associate degree for transfer program we just looked at. I know these numbers are pretty dramatic, but the truth is, as I said, about 800 in the first year, about 5,000 in the second, and nearly 12,000 in the third year. And I think you're going to see these numbers continue to skyrocket into the future. This relates to Member Van Leeuwen's question a moment ago, and that is that the transfer in our system is really dictated from three sources. One is the in-state and out-of-state public and private institutions. I'm sorry, the in-state private institutions and the out-of-state public and private institutions. The second is the University of California, and the third is the California State University. If you look on page 6, you can see both the in-state, out-state, and the two public in-state systems, and you can see that the real workhorse in terms of transfer for our students is the California State University. And you can see how erratic that chart has been, and it has a direct impact on our overall success numbers because we are so impacted by the number of students that can transfer depending on how many can be accepted by the California State University. So if you look, for example, at that 910 number, that was when CSU had a dramatic downturn and they had to literally shut the doors in the faces of our students for spring enrollment that year, and that's what caused that number to go down so dramatically. It did go back up when they opened it back up the following year, and then like us, they began to have to ration education. It went back down, and now you can see as evidence, because they got a little bit more money last year, those numbers are going back up. Now, one thing to point out to the board is that because of the new associate degree for transfer, you are likely to see our success numbers continue to go up even if the CSU is forced to ration seats to our students, because a success for us is if a student completes that associate degree for transfer. Yes, we want to see them transfer, but in the past, our success numbers have been artificially diminished when CSU had to ration off their transfer. Now, because our students can complete the degree, even if they don't get to transfer, they're going to show up in our success numbers, and I think we'll be less susceptible internally to those completion numbers being impacted than we have been in the past. When you look overall at our scoring metrics, remember our scorecard has about a half a dozen metrics in them, and this is a little chart. It's also a little easier to see on page 13 in the book. We try to graphically represent how we're doing, and as you can see, our completion numbers still have not rebounded. We're down about 9/10 of a point in the current year. However, our 30-unit accumulation is up, as are the numbers on remedial English, remedial math, and remedial English ESL, and those are all building blocks. Unfortunately, we saw a slight, almost imperceptible downturn in CTE numbers, which I think you'll probably see that bounce back in the coming year. But again, you're looking at what we believe to be the most accountable system of public higher education in the country. And then I would call your attention to the chart again on page 13, but graphically represented. And these represent the goals that the Board of Governors set in July for added completions over the next 10 entering classes. And this tries to graphically show you what it would mean if we are successful and see 250,000 more students succeeding in our system as a result of the work we're doing. We believe, obviously, that it is a doable goal. We think the Student Success Initiative and the activities the colleges are undertaking are absolutely going to ultimately result in more and more students getting through our system. And we're excited about the future and the proposition of seeing more of our students complete in greater and greater numbers. This document is public as of tomorrow, or actually as of today. The press release on the success of this will go out tomorrow. I'll be sharing this with trustees up and down the state on Saturday evening at the trustee conference that's being held here in Sacramento. Vince Stewart has scheduled meetings beginning next week in the legislature for us to begin to communicate with the leadership about the success of the system. Again, the scorecard is a bold move because both your downs and your ups get pretty easy to spot. If you look at any one of our 112 colleges, you see how they're doing on every one of those indicators. You've just seen the statewide numbers, and I would tell you that we are very pleased and proud of the accomplishments that this report represents. We're also mindful we still have a long way to go, and with that, I'd be happy to try to answer any of your questions.
Thank you so much, Chancellor. Before we go to public, before we go to the board member comments, are there any?
We have no comment cards.
I'll open it up to the board for discussion or questions. Give everybody a chance to absorb it. It's remarkable. Vice President Estolano.
Chancellor Harris, thank you very much for the report. It's really terrific. It's great to see such great numbers. So this is sort of the overall framing at the 20,000-foot level, maybe, right, the entire system. It'd be great to dig into some of these metric numbers a little more deeply, maybe in a future meeting. For example, on the remediation issue, I mean, it's an issue of great concern since 70% of the folks that come into our system, you know, aren't prepared for college. So maybe at a future meeting, we can talk a little bit about some of the strategies that are going into getting basic skills up. Those of us who were up for confirmation, I think we mostly all got the same questions, and our attention was drawn to a particular report regarding accelerated remediation classes and the dramatic increases in success rates when people go through those courses versus a typical levels of remediation. So I thought there were dramatic data. It would be great to get a report on that and a sense of, since that report came out, which I think is a couple years old, has there been an uptick in the number of colleges that are adopting these strategies, maybe some of the barriers to adopting these strategies, and how we might further encourage these strategies to be implemented across the board. So that's just one thing that when we look at the page 13, the remedial English and remedial math and ESL data, they're pretty flat. And I know we only have 1 year to judge, so it's hard to see a trend. But I think it would be great if we could dig into that, if not the next meeting, certainly the following meeting.
We will absolutely do that. I would say to the board that some of those promising practices, not only in acceleration but in compression and modularization, are beginning to be adopted up and down the state, and we'll report back to you. The other thing that you should know is that represented in this report is really the sort of tip of the pyramid. Remember, the data that supports this can be drilled down by race and ethnicity, by age and gender. We can slice and dice this in a myriad of ways. So when you would like those kinds of specific requests, please feel free to make them. We'll do our best to generate those data and report them back to you. So we will come back with that.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Member Avalos.
Thank you, Chancellor. This is a great report, and thank you for your presentation. I think what I'd like to see in future conversation would be, what relates to the equity budget, right? We spent $100 million, I think, last year. I don't know if we spent it, but it was allocated. And so I'd like to see, what is, how's the needle moving with that budget as it spends? Because, based on page 13, remedial is up slightly for ESL, for math, it's slightly up. So to me, it's like, as we spend the budget, what is the impact and how are we moving the needle on those, big initiatives?
Absolutely. I would remind the board that we are looking at 6-year-long cohorts. Right. And the cohort you're looking at now started its education 6+ years ago. And I think it's really important. I will tell you that the uptick in these three basic skills components has been a couple, 3 years now, and we can show you some charts that show you over time how that looks. But the investments that we're making in equity and student success I think are going to begin to show up in the numbers in the very near future, because as each 6-year cohort moves forward, you are measuring students that more and more had these student success programs at the colleges when they actually attended. So we absolutely will provide some more of that information in the future. And I think you're going to see numbers that are going to start moving up across the board.
Member, I had a couple of quick comments too. One is I was particularly struck by the graph that showed that we are at a giving more awards than ever before, and was an indication to me, not only a testimony to your leadership and that of Chancellor Scott and the whole system, that when we were faced with the budget crisis, what we ended up doing was focusing on the things that actually mattered, and then provided incentives for completion. And so you see the results. You would have thought with the dramatic drop in course offerings and others that you would actually see fewer degree completions. But actually the districts made the right call in preserving the classes that actually led to credentials, as opposed to providing all the, they really had to narrow their focus, and it's something that seems like a remarkable accomplishment that I wanted to highlight. The other item I wanted to highlight was what you pointed out in the transfer rate to the Cal State University system.
Yeah.
And this came up in my hearing about what has led to some of these important strides forward in our system. And you'll see that big dip in transfers between 08, 09, 09, 010. It's probably not a coincidence that SB 1440 was passed that legislative session, that the legislature noted that we need to create a system that is going to be provide a more effective pathway between the two. And so it's something for all of us to be mindful that people are looking at these numbers and then making policy decisions based on these numbers. And then as a result, I hope that we continue to grow that transfer rate. And then I'm encouraged by the conversations that you've had, and that the UC system has talked more openly than I've ever heard before about the importance of community college transfers to them as well. But I don't know if you're getting any feedback or hearing some of those same themes.
We really are. You know, President Napolitano has a group working on transfer from community colleges, and as you can see from these charts, there are significantly fewer who are able to transfer to the University of California, and one of President Napolitano's concerns is that all of their transfers come from a very small number of our colleges, and they seem to feel that there are, and I think they're right, are parts of the state that are sort of disenfranchised when it relates to transfer to the UC. And so they want to both increase the number of transfers, and they want to spread out the opportunities to the entire state. The other comment I would make related to your first point about completions, and that is that I think it's important to note that what these data don't show is that at the same time we were rationing education and these completions were going up, our faculty were faced with more and more students in every single class. The average class size statewide went from about 27 and a half, 28, up to almost 32, which is really remarkable. I mean, everybody in our institutions, not only in the classrooms, but in the financial aid office and admissions, every place faced more and more students, and yet we were able to not only maintain but enhance our completion numbers. So it's been a difficult several years, but as these numbers show, a successful ones.
Thank you very much. And my last point is just I wish all segments of higher education were as transparent with the data and made this type of information as readily and available and easily understood. And so my appreciation to you and the team for continuing to highlight this.
And by the way, we will have a case of these reports available. We're going to bring them in the morning, but we got kind of ahead. But we'll have a case of those available in the morning for the board, anyone who wants to take some of those, or if you want them to mail us to you. Obviously, we printed initially a couple of thousand. There's nothing we'd like better than to print a couple thousand more.
Are there any further questions for the Chancellor? Okay, so that concludes all the action and reading items today. I want to go over a couple of things that regarding the schedule. So I'm going to adjourn the meeting till tomorrow morning, but stay tuned because I'm just going to give some marching orders for announcements for those. So the meeting is adjourned until tomorrow at 9 a.m. Okay, so for tonight, I just want to let the board members know it's the President's State of the Union address, and